rectangle. All right, once you start that command, the prompt is saying to specify the first corner point. You know what you can do? You can just go ahead and pick a point. And it's just like drawing a window. You can just pick another point, the opposite corner, and you've got a rectangle. Just like that. Notice that with your heads-up display, with your dynamic input, when you start the rectangle tool and you pick your start corner, you have dimensions on either side. So let's say I wanted to draw a rectangle at very specific dimensions, perhaps 5 feet by 3 feet. Here you can see how the blue text is waiting for us to put in a value. I'm going to put in 5 feet. Now here's the trick to this. Do not use comma in this situation. We're not defining a coordinate. So I'm going to put in here 5 feet, and if you need me to do this again, I will. I'm going to put in 5 feet to get to this other rectangle, this other text box right here. You hit the tab key on your keyboard. Tab over to the next window. Look how that locks in 5 feet. Now I can enter in any other dimension like 3 feet. And I've drawn a rectangle at precisely those dimensions, 5 feet by 3 feet. All right? Now I could use a similar situation to what I did earlier this morning. If I turn on my UCS icon, we can see that the origin of this drawing is down here. If I turn on the grid, and let me just do a couple things here. If I turn on my grid and do what I've done before, so this is a little reminder of what we were doing the other day, right? And not the other day, this morning. My goodness, this morning. Here's what I'm getting at. I could do the exact same thing that I did this morning with this rectangle tool. When it asked me to specify a corner point, I could put in an absolute coordinate of 1, 1. And then I could specify 5 units in the X or the length and tab over to 3 units in the Y. And look at that, I get a rectangle just like that, okay? I like to show that. It's very similar to what I did this morning. But I'm using a rectangle tool. Now you have other options here. Rectangle. The other options are this. Once I click to define a corner point, I can specify what the area of the rectangle is going to be before I even draw it. Okay? So let's say I need to draw a rectangle, and the rectangle has to have a square footage of 15 square feet. This one over here has 15 square feet. It's 5 foot by 3 foot, 15 square feet. But what if I need to specify that one edge of the rectangle has to be exactly 1 foot 8 inches long? How am I going to figure out what the other length of the rectangle is going to be and yet still come up with the proper square footage? Well, I can start the option for area. Now the problem, it's not a problem, but here's the issue with this, is that the units of square in this architectural units drawing are in square inches. So if I want this to be 15 square feet, I have to figure out what that area is going to be in square inches. That's what it's asking for here. Enter area of rectangle in square inches. So you can go to conversion, convert square inches into square feet and vice versa. And over here I can say 15 square feet, and that gives me 2,160 square inches. So if I enter in 2,160, that's going to be the area in square feet, 15 feet. Now it asks me, all right, what do you want to calculate the thing on? I'm gonna select length. So I want it to automatically figure out the length of my rectangle. But now I have to enter in that length. See, I always get this mixed up. Based on, I should have met, yeah. Anyway, you'll see what happens. So what did I say? I want it to be 1 foot 8 inches. I'm going to just type in 1 foot 8. Now this is going to be for later, guys. Notice the syntax that I've used here for feet and inches. The first unit followed by the inch mark. I'm sorry. The first unit followed by the apostrophe or the foot mark denotes feet, obviously. So it's 1 foot, and there's no space, no hyphen, no nothing in between that and the units of inches. So 1 foot 8, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And so there is my rectangle. I meant for it to go the other way, but as you can see, I selected length instead of width. So this object here has the same square footage as this one. Now let me try it again, but this time I'm going to use width instead of length. Let's try it again here. Rectangle. You have to pick a point to start to get to the area option. I'm going to select area. It wants to know what area I want. I'm going to accept my default as 2,160 square inches. This time I'm going to go with width. And for width, I want it to be 1 foot 8 inches. And there you go, I figured that out. Now, how can I check that? I'm actually have an exercise all about measuring tools later on. But a little spoiler maybe, we'll do it right now. Over here on my home tab, I have some measuring tools. And one of them is a way that I can quickly find the area of something. And so if I come over here, I'll do this guy first. We know this one is 15 square feet. So the way that I do this is I basically just trace around until I get the whole thing here. Now, it's waiting for one more point here. And you can see the green areas denoting, hey, this is the area that's going to be computed. But I don't need to pick any more points, so I'm just going to go to total. See what this says right here? Total, meaning I'll just hit enter at the points that I have selected. And it says right there that this is 15 square feet, or 2,160 square inches. So if I check either one of these guys over here, area, in the same manner, you're going to see the same results. Total, same thing, 2,160 square inches, or 15 square feet. Here, I'll do it one more time to this guy. Basically, using your object snaps and going around and selecting all of the corners of the object you want to find out its area. Hit enter, and it will read out that area. All right, I'm going to exit out of my measuring tool. Okay, so that is the rectangle tool. All right, in this little area here, we're going to look at and practice with the polygon tool. Now, forever and ever and ever, I've been meaning to fix this drawing that I hand out to students, because this is supposed to say, this one's polyline, this one's rectangle, and this one's supposed to say polygon. But what somebody did who created this, they basically took the text from here, copied it over to here, and forgot to edit. So here's another little spoiler alert, the thing that we can do for what we're going to learn tomorrow. If I want to edit text, you simply double click on the text. When you double click on the text, notice a text window appears. It has a little menu, ruler, and look, it has its own contextual tab of all sorts of options. All I want you to do is just, you get a little introduction to editing text. You can just highlight the text in the text window and put in a new name for this area. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm just throwing this in here because it bothers me. Polygon. But I like to leave it as a sort of quick little exercise for my students. Now, when you're done editing the text, you can either click outside of the little ruler text box, or you can click here, Close Text Editor. Either way. All right. What I want you to do now is I want you to draw, I know we're going to do the polygon tool, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to draw a line, just like pick a point sort of near the left-hand side of this area here. I want you to draw a line, and I want the line to be exactly, how about, let me see here, how about 1 foot, yeah, that's it. How about just 1 foot? Straight up. That's what I meant to say. So draw a line, and I want it to be precisely 90 degrees and 1 foot long. All right? And then what I want you to do is I want you to copy this line, and I need it to be copied along the same trajectory. So I don't want you to go off at an angle. Copy it over approximately, doesn't have to be exact, approximately 4 feet. And it has to be exactly in the 0 degree direction. I want the two lines to line up. I want them to be in the same alignment. So I'm going to just move it over maybe 4 feet. Look how I can also use direct distance entry with my move command. I didn't even mention that. All right, and then once you've done that, or my copy command, Once you've done that, go ahead and hit enter. And all I need is just 2 lines, and they're the same exact length, straight up. The reason I'm doing this is for teaching purposes. This is not in any way something that you have to do in order to create a polygon, okay? Just so you realize this. This is strictly for a teaching moment, adding these 2 lines here, and has nothing to do with any of the steps involved in creating a polygon, okay? All right, now that you know that, let's start the polygon tool. Here's the polygon tool. Go ahead and start that command. For the number of sides, I'm going to go ahead and enter in, how about 5 sides? We'll make a pentagon. Go ahead and put in 5 sides and hit enter. Next, it wants to know where the center of the polyline is going to be. I want you to pick the bottom of the first line, the end point of the bottom of the first line as the center of your polygon. Now, it's asking whether or not you want the polygon to be inscribed within a circle or circumscribed about a circle. It's not going to draw a circle. What it's asking for is whether or not, and that's why I draw these lines here, whether or not the radius that we're going to enter in for this polygon aligns the polygon with the face of a polygon or the side of a polygon or the corner of a polygon. Let's start with the inscribed first. Inscribe. So you can click that right out of this option right here that pops up right next to your cursor. Inscribe. Then what I want you to do is draw a line and have it click on the endpoint or the top of the line you drew previously, okay? All right. There's a pentagon. When you inscribe a pentagon within a circle, the corner of the polygon is where the radius that you define is denoted. All right, let's try it again, but circumscribe this time.
Oh, I can't really talk.
All right, here's what I want you to do now. Start the same tool, polygon. Look how 5 is the default. You can just hit enter. You don't have to enter it in again. Just hit enter on your keyboard. Pick the bottom of this line as the center of your polygon. Okay? And then this time you're going to select circumscribe, about a circle. All right, now this time, if you move straight up, the pentagon is going to be upside down. That's okay. But here, if you really want to see sort of the effect of this, try this. Move your mouse straight down. You see how you have your laser beam there. I want you to make sure your laser beam is pointing straight down at 270 degrees, and I want you to type in 1 foot. That's going to be, you're specifying the radius of the circle. 1 foot. Look at the difference between the two. Now, both of these specified the same radius, 1 foot. But look how this one doesn't reach the corner. That's because if you draw a line here to the midpoint here, this is 1 foot. This is the radius. Here, if you want to measure, here's a distance measuring tool. So just like using the area tool, if you pick on this point and this point, it'll show you, look, that's 1 foot. By the way, if you do this, to get out of it, it's a little annoying because it sort of stays on. You have to click exit here. Anyway, you see the difference between circumscribed and inscribed. And if you even want to take it a step further, you could draw a circle that has a radius of 1 foot, just like this. And you see the difference here. One is in the circle and one is about the circle. All right. All right, any questions about our advanced drawing commands?
Yes, sir. I must have had a setting wrong. I'm not being able to do what you just did.
Okay. So you're talking about creating a polygon?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, here's what I'm going to do with you. You do not need to add in all of these sort of teaching elements. I just wanted to, the reason I did this is to show the difference between those two different options, inscribe and circumscribe. So you don't have to put the line, you don't have to draw the circles. For me and you, here's what I want you to do. Just start the polygon tool. All right? Pick anywhere within that little square to start. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a little off track. Notice the prompt. Always look at the prompts. They'll help you through, and I should have done that. It says enter the number of sides, and I was using 5. You can put in anything you want. It has to be at least 3, though. But put in however many sides you want, and hit enter. And then it says specify the center of the polygon. So just pick some random point inside of that polygon area. Doesn't have, yeah, a little bit towards the center perhaps. All right, so just pick a point. All right, now do the inscribe. So you can just select, that's right, just click right on the inscribe. And now just put in a value of 1 foot. Just type in 1 foot. And hit enter. Hit enter. There you go. So what we're seeing here, now try this. Here, this will be interesting for everybody else to see. Watch this. Start the same command again. All right. See how it says 5 sides? You don't have to enter that in again. Just hit enter. All right. Now, when it says specify the center of the polygon, here's what I want you to do. It's a little thing here I want you to do. I want you to hold down your shift key and right click. Now, let go of your shift key. I want you to select from this list geometric center. All right, now click on the polygon that's already there. It's going to, now you have to pick on the side there first. You have to hover, yeah, and there, that'll work. You see how you see the grip? Now go ahead and click. Now, this time do circumscribe. Now point your cursor straight down and type in 1 foot. That's the same radius you had the last time. Type in 1 foot and hit enter. Perfect. You see how you use the same radius for both those, but the different options, inscribed and circumscribed, gave you different sized polygons. One has the radius go to the corner of the polygon, and one radius option the radius goes to the side of the polygon. But there you go. That's how you create a polygon.
Thank you.
You've got it. All right. Now, I'm going to say something that might sound a little strange. In AutoCAD, there is no such thing as a rectangle. In AutoCAD, there is no such thing as a polygon. All right? What do I mean by that? Sounds kind of weird. Here's what I mean. When I hover over a line, my little tooltip pops up and it tells me the name of this AutoCAD entity. This AutoCAD entity is a line. When I hover over a circle, my little tooltip pops up and it tells me that this AutoCAD entity is a circle. When I hover over an arc, it's an arc. When I hover over text, it's text. Later in just a second, we're going to be looking at something called a block. When I hover over something, here, this is a block. Now, when I hover over a rectangle, before I get to that, sorry. When I hover over a polyline, it says it's a polyline. All right, so when I hover over a rectangle, you're probably expecting it to say, hey, rectangle. It is not. It is a polyline. When you hover over a polygon, you expect it to say polygon or even pentagon? No. It's going to say polyline. So these tools up here that you use, they are not rectangle creators. They're not polygon creators. What they are polylines that create rectangles. Or more specifically, as you can see in the tooltip, this tool creates a rectangular polyline. The polygon tool is a tool that creates an equilateral closed polyline. Okay? I like to point that out to people. There's no such thing in AutoCAD as a rectangle or a polygon. They're all closed polylines. All right. Moving on. Now we're going to take a look at some advanced modify commands. So, just like we've been doing here, we've been looking at basic draw commands and basic modify commands. Then we stepped into advanced draw commands. Now we're going to look at advanced modify commands. All right, we're going to start over here. We'll start with a command called explode. What explode does is it allows you to take what we refer to as a compound element or entity and break it down to its component parts. This is a closed polyline. It consists of 3 line segments, but they're all put together as one entity called a polyline. There comes a time where sometimes to work with objects or to make it easier or something, you need to break it down to its component elements. To do that, we use a command called explode. All right? So if you click here, explode, you can see what it says. It breaks a compound object down to its component objects. Go ahead and click on explode and then select this polyline. All right? Once the polyline is selected, go ahead and hit enter. Now, go back to the polyline. It's no longer a polyline. It is now 4 separate lines. So now you've broken that thing down to its basic components. Here, I mentioned this just recently, this is what's referred to as a block reference or a block. This actually is composed of several compound elements. All right? Or I shouldn't say it that way. This is actually composed of several component elements, and one of those elements is a compound element. All right. Notice also when I hover over this object and the tooltip pops up, it says that this element, this entity, this block, is on the door layer. And it's showing you the color is by the layer and the line type is by the layer, but it is a cyan color. Go ahead and explode it. Select explode, click on the door, and watch what happens when you hit enter. It now is broken into two component elements. One is the arc, and notice what happened to the layer. The entire block was on the door layer, but the component elements were on the 0 layer. Layer 0 has a special property that when it's inside of a block reference, the block, the elements that are on layer 0, when the block is placed on the layer, those elements will inherit or take on the properties of the current layer that it's on. Now that I've exploded it down, it's no longer a block, and it's showing its true layer underneath, if you will. Now here's another thing. This was also a polyline, a closed polyline. So this is what I was referring to. This one is also a compound element, so we could explode it even further. So you can go ahead and click explode again, and you can now really break it down to its base components now. Okay? That's the explode command. All right, any questions about that? All right, let's take a look at mirror. All right, I have a little exercise here for mirror. Let's start on this side here. I have a door here, and I would like to reorient it so it takes on the same orientation as this door. Basically, I want to flip it. I want to take this object and flip it so it's looking in the other direction. All right, so let's start the mirror command. Here's the mirror command. Okay. It asks to select the objects you want to mirror. I'm going to go ahead and select this door, this block. All right, once I've selected it, I'm going to hit enter because that's the only thing I want to mirror. Now it asks you to draw an imaginary line, a mirror line is what it's asking for. So don't be afraid that you're going to be leaving behind an actual line. No, this is strictly something that's used inside of this command. And it's about this line that the elements mirror, okay? Try this, and I'm not going to be exact about this, but if you just sort of pick a point in between the end of the arc and the hinge point, like right about here in the middle, go ahead and pick a point and move your mouse straight up or straight down. Notice how it shows a mirror image mirrored along that mirror line. Now try this. Move your mouse to the left or right. Look how you can mirror it that way. So the mirror line is the reflection second line, the line about which everything mirrors. All right, point your cursor straight up and go ahead and click to pick the end point of the mirror line. All right, now it says, do you want us to erase the source object? In this case, I simply want the object to be reoriented. I don't need the second object there. So I'm going to say yes, erase the source object. And there, it mirrored the object. So it's kind of like, think of it like this. We basically copied that element. But when we were done, we didn't want the original copy anymore, or the original. We just wanted the copy. Over here, we're going to do exactly the opposite. We're going to mirror this, but we're going to keep the copy. We're going to keep the original. So here I have a situation where I want this door to take on the symbol of a double door. So I can take one object and just mirror it so it looks like a double door. So here, let's do it this way. Select the object first. So go ahead and select this block. Start the mirror command. Pick the end point of the arc as the start point of your mirror line. And then draw a nice straight line either up or down. And pick a point. Now this time when it says erase source objects, you can go ahead and hit enter to accept the default. No, I don't want to. So just hit enter. And now you've made a copy, but a mirror image copy. And the original stayed behind. All right, that is the mirror command. The next one I have here is rotate. Sometimes you don't want to flip the element. You just need to rotate it and maintain its sort of orientation, but it needs to be at a different angle. I have an example over here, like here's a door. Okay. You know, I've been meaning to do this forever, but I'm just going to do something. You do not, please, do not do this. I'm going to do something on my screen to give this exercise a little context. But you're going to just do it the same exact way without the context. Let's say I add a block. Here, do I have a wall layer? Oh, I do. Here's a wall layer. All right. Let's let's say I have some walls here and I have a door opening and I need to rotate this object so that it is oriented to the door opening. Okay? So I know you guys don't have this reference, but this just makes it a little bit clearer of where this might come into play and the angle that we might use. So here's what you don't have to, please don't. Just select your door block and start the rotate command. Here's the rotate command. All right, now the first thing the rotate command needs to know is what is the base point? Now, the base point can be very specific or it doesn't have to be. Now, this is a situation here on my screen where it does need to be very specific. Because for you guys, if you just sort of pick a point anywhere and then look how I can just rotate this at whatever angle I want, I've rotated it, but now I need to move it into place. So the base point in my situation would be very important. Let me undo this. So let's do it together, even though you don't have a reference. Here's what I want you to do. With the block selected and you click rotate, when it asks for a specified base point, you're going to pick this corner hinge point of the door. All right, so the furthest most right-hand corner of the door panel. That's the base point. Now you can see that it's asking for a rotation angle. And what's nice about this, you have a rubber band here, and as you move your mouse around, you can see the different angles and orientation. So if you just point your cursor straight down, okay, now not straight up like the mirror command, because look how straight up at a 0 degrees, it's going to rotate it in the what? Counterclockwise direction. Look at that. But here, if you point your cursor down, and that angle is 270. But you can just go ahead and point your cursor straight down. When you get the little laser beam, you know you're doing it precisely at a vertical angle. And then go ahead and click. And you can see how you can rotate that element into place. All right? All right, so that's the rotate command. Now, let's take a look at scale. Scale allows us to change the size of something. Here I have an example down over here. Let's say I have a square here, and I want to shrink it down to half its size. In fact, that's what this guy is over here. If I move this guy over here, you'll see, if I copy him around, he is exactly half the size of this object. All right, so how do I get the big guy to be the same size as the little guy, which is half the size? Well, I'm going to scale the rectangle down by 0.5, half. I'm going to scale it down by half. Here's the scale command right here. If you start the scale command, go ahead and select the big rectangle. When you're done selecting objects, go ahead and hit enter. Now it wants to know what the base point is for this. Here's the deal. point you pick determines about which the element scales up or down. All right. Now, if you pick some sort of random point, like this, don't do this, but watch. If you pick some sort of random point, now the object is going to scale up or down about that random point. All right. What if you wanted to make sure that perhaps this lower right-hand corner of the object stays in the same place and everything scales down about that point? Well, that'd be your base point. All right, so I'm going to do it again, scale, and when it asks for a base point, I'm going to select the lower right-hand corner. Now, one thing that you can see, I can move my rubber band around and I can see different sizes, both smaller and bigger. But those aren't precise scale factors. So I'm going to reduce the size of this by a scale factor of 0.5, and I'm going to hit enter. 0.5 or half. And there you can see I've scaled that element down by half. Now, if you want it back to its original size, what's the scale factor? 2. Try it. Select the rectangle. Start the scale command. Pick the lower right-hand corner. And then this time for the scale factor, put in 2. And now it's back to its original size. All right, here's one last thing I'm going to throw in. The length of this thing is some unusual off number length. It's 2'2" and 59/128 of an inch. Okay, let's say I want to scale this thing, but I want this side of it, the bottom of it, I want it to be exactly 3 feet long. I want the length of the bottom of this rectangle to be 3 feet, but I want to maintain the same aspect ratio, or the same size or spacing of the rectangle. I just want to increase this, scale this thing up so that this side is 3 feet, not 2'2" and 5'59", 128. Okay, how do I do that? All right, watch this, and you can play along at home. Let me cancel out of this. Select your rectangle, or I'm sorry, I should say polyline. Select your polyline. Start the scale command. Same as before, I'm going to pick the lower right-hand corner as my base point. But now I want that lower side to be exactly 3 feet long. Now, how do I do that? Now, I don't do it this way. You see how there's a text box there? No, if I put in something there, let's say I put in 3 feet. That's not 3 feet, that's 36. That's a scale factor of 36. Okay, I just increased this thing by 36. Why? Because when I put 3 feet, it thinks 36 units, or scale factor, 36 scale factor. And so now the thing is 36 times the size it used to be. So that's not right. Let me undo it. Undo it. All right, here's how you do it. I'm going to start again. Select the object, start the scale command. Pick the lower right-hand corner as the base point. What I have to do is I have to tell AutoCAD what is the original length of the bottom of this rectangle. What I need to do is tell it or give it a reference length. It has to know what are we starting with. And then I'm going to tell it what I want to end up with. All right? So you'll see here's an option for reference. I'm going to go ahead and select that, reference. Now Now it wants to know what the reference length. Now I don't remember what that was. That reference length was something like 2'2" and 59, 120. I don't remember the exact length. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pick points off the bottom of the rectangle as a reference. So I'm going to start here in the lower right hand corner. And then I'm going to pick this corner over here. This is the reference length. All right, now when I do that, look how my cursor and my rubber band and so forth, they're all relative to that bottom thing. Now this time, I can put in 3 feet because the first thing that I picked off the object was the reference length. Now, look what it says in my prompt. It says, can you please give me the new length? I'll put in here 3 feet. And there you go. And here, I'll do a little quick measurement here. I'm pretty sure it's correct. This is now 3 feet. So that's using the reference option. All right. Any questions about explode, mirror, rotate, or scale? Okay then. Let's take a look at fillet and chamfer. All right. First of all, before we get started, holy crap. That's why I don't like the, oh, this is perfect. Oh my God, I was just about to do this. This just, I'm going to tell you guys, this is random. I was going to tell you guys that this is a fillet. I did not plan this at all. Okay, this is a fillet. This is a fillet. Where's a good one here? Here's a good one. These little rounds on like metal or wood parts, those are called fillets. Okay? All right, so remember, this is a fillet and this is a fillet. Okay. And the other element there is a chamfer. So they're very closely related, except one is a beveled edge and one is a round edge, or concave edge in some situations. Chamfer here's a good one. Yeah, right here. Perfect. All right, so sort of a straight edge. Like that. So a round versus a beveled edge. All right. Let's move over to right here, chamfer and fillet. And we're going to start with the fillet command. These two commands are also kind of closely related, kind of like the trim and extend commands are kind of related to one another. These two are kind of related to one another. And they put them in the same little drop down here. All right, so let's start with the fillet command. Go ahead and start the fillet command. Now, the first thing you might want to do is you want to check to see what the radius is. So we want to create a little round, and we have to define the radius of that round. So one of the options being radius. Go ahead and start that option. And it has a radius set here in this drawing of 1 foot. That'll be fine. We'll go with 1 foot. So I want you to accept the default. Just hit enter. All right, now what you can do is you can come over to two elements, like these two lines of this polyline, and if you click on one after the other, one, and I'm going to hover before I click, look how it shows what's going to happen as soon as I click on that line. It's going to create that little fillet. So it shows a preview. Go ahead and click. And so now you've added that little round to that corner. All right. Why don't we try this? Let's change the radius to 6 inches. And I want to show you a way in which you can do a multiple fillet, meaning you don't have to stop after each fillet. See how the command just ended? It kicked us out of the command. We were done. But what if you have a lot more fillets at? What if I want to add a 6-inch round fillet to each one of these corners here? All right, so let's do that. Let's start the fillet command. Go to radius, and we're going to change it from 1 foot to 6 inches. All right, type in 6 and hit enter. Now, before you click on anything, look at this option down here, multiple. That's how we can do more than one fillet at a time. So type in M for multiple. And now you can go around this polyline and add multiple fillets to it. Just like that. Okay? Here, how about over here? I'm just playing around now. How about here? These two lines here. Oh, the radius is too large. Okay. Where do I have? How about over here? There you go. That's what I was looking for. I can go all over the place with this. All right, so that's a fillet. Now let's try chamfer. All right, now with chamfer, you don't have a radius, obviously, but what you do have is you have two distances. So you can have the two distances be different, or they can be the same. Now, if they're different distances, the first line you click on is going to be the first distance you enter, and the second line you click on is going to be the second distance. All right, to demonstrate that, go ahead and start the chamfer command. Let's activate the distance option. Here, this time I haven't done this in a while. I haven't done the down arrow on my keyboard. Down arrow on my keyboard. Distance. Here it is, distance. The first distance, let's make it 12 inches. and go ahead and hit enter. Now, it automatically assumes that we want the second distance to also be 12, but I'm going to make it different. I'm going to make it 6 and hit enter. All right, now remember, the first line you click is going to take on the 12-inch distance, and the second line you click on is going to take on the 6-inch difference. You see the difference? You see what I did there? All right. Now I want to do a chamfer to all the corners. I forgot to use my multiple. I always do that. All right, so I'm going to start the command again. Now, once you enter in some distances, you don't need to re-enter them in. So you can, you don't have to do anything. So the first one is going to be the 12-inch, and the second is going to be the 6-inch. Oh, I forgot to do multiple again. Oh my God, I am losing my brain. Let me undo it. My goodness. Chamfer, multiple first. I always forget multiple. Then I can go ahead and do it. All right, so the first distance is 12 inches. The second is 6. The first distance is 12 inches. The second is 6. The first distance is 12 inches. The second is 6. And there you go. All right. All right. I want you to do something for me. I want you to select both of these polylines, and I want you to explode them. All right, select both of the polylines and explode them. All right, once they're exploded, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to select all of the arcs and the beveled lines of both the chamfer and fillet results, and I'd like you to delete them. So you end up with something that looks like this. All right. Then, to make this exercise a little bit more interesting, I would like you to start the extend command, and then I want you to just, the lower line here, I just want you to extend these lines past each other like this. Something like that. You don't go all the way up to the, what am I trying to say here? But just do something like this. Leave the 4 lines up here alone, and just stop extending something like that. And you don't have to have all of them. I just want, some examples, because I want to show you some things you can do with the fillet command. All right. Now you don't need to have every single extension that I've got here. If you got a couple that extend beyond the corner here, then you'll be fine. You'll get the idea. All right, here's why I'm doing this. Here's the deal. What if I needed this line and this line to come together at a sharp corner here? Okay, what if I needed to have these, in a sense, extend to a corner? All right, now one way I could do this is I could use the extend command. All right, but it's going to be a pain in the neck. I could use the extend command, and I could extend this here, and then extend this here, and then if I hold down my shift key, I could trim this off here like that, and I get what I want. But I've got a much easier way to achieve the same thing. I'm going to undo that. what you can do is you can basically use the fillet command, and if you set a 0 radius instead of having an actual radius, you put 0 for the radius. That means that no little round is going to be created, and therefore what you end up being able to do is you're able to extend to a corner or trim to a corner. They call it applying a corner. Let's try it. Start your fillet command. All right. Go to the radius option, radius, and set the radius to 0 and hit enter. All right. I'm going to try to remember this. I want you to hit multiple. And now go around this top thing here and select each of the lines and watch what happens. Look at that. They come to a nice corner. Select one line, select the other line, and see how they come to a nice corner. Same thing over here. A nice corner. Same thing over here. A nice corner. Now I extend it to a corner. Here I have lines that extend beyond, and so I can trim, in a sense, to a corner. Now, notice what I did up here. It was easy to do it here because those were the only sort of portions of the lines I could really click on. What I'm getting at is this. When you want to trim to a corner using the fillet command, you want to pick on the parts of the geometry you want to keep. I want to, let's say, for instance, I want to get rid of this little portion of this line, and I want to trim this back to a nice corner. Don't click on this because people hear the word trim and they're used to using the trim command. They click on the part they want to trim off. No, that's not what we're doing here. We're picking on the part we want to keep, and then we're trimming back to a corner. All right. That's why sometimes instead of to avoid confusion, they call it apply a corner. So I can click on the part I want to keep, and then this part here, and I can apply a corner. How about down here? Same thing. Apply a corner. So this is one of the methods that you can very easily affect this outcome without having to use the trim or extend command. All right. Now here's another thing I want to do, and then we'll finish up with trim and fillet and chamfer. I'm still in the command. If you need to, start the command back up again. I'm going to change the radius back to 6 inches. And I'm going to hit multiple here. All right, let's say there's some work you need to do, and you have to apply a 6-inch fillet to all of these elements. All right, so you're going around and you're doing exactly what we've done previously, right? But my point is this. You've got this task where you've got to add all of these radiuses, all of these fillets. But what if you come up against something that you need to apply a corner? It would be kind of a hassle to have to change the radius to 0 just to apply a corner. Then, to get back to the task at hand, you need to change it back to 6 inches. All right? That's a pain in the neck. So one of the things I didn't point out, but now you can kind of see it in my command line text above the command line. Look what it says here. Select the second object, or if you hold down your shift key, see how the shift key is very prominent in these commands. If you hold down the shift key and then select, you will apply a corner. Basically what it's going to do, it's going to ignore the 6-inch radius. Here, try it. Hold down your shift key, and if you come over to these objects, look how you can apply a corner. And look how it's adding an additional corner there. You see that? Now I still have, and I should have left these alone up here. I still have my 6. If I let go, here I'll go over here. If I let go of the shift key, I'm back to 6-inch radiuses. So there's the convenience. You don't have to change to a 0 radius if you have like the need to keep a particular radius going here. When you need the corner, you just I'm trying to find somewhere. Here, how about over here? When you need the corner, you just hold down your shift key, and remember, it's not like trim. You want to pick on the parts you want to keep. Okay, so for instance, if I want this portion of this line to go away, what I would do is I would pick on the portion I want to keep and then trim like this. Oh, I meant to hold down my shift key. There you go. There's my shift key. All right. You'll find the fillet command applying a corner to be very useful for all sorts of situations. All right. That's fillet and chamfer. Any questions? Okay, then. All right. I'm going to do 2 more here. Stretch. And then I'm going to take a quick look at array. And after I get those 2 done, I really want to focus on this offset. This offset command is going to be one of the most and more important commands that you learn. And the reason is that a majority of the way in which you add geometry to a drawing, particularly a floor plan, the way that you locate elements and distances and so forth, the majority of time is going to be with an offset command. Because you're going to have things like dimensions, and you're going to have like existing geometry. And basically what you're going to learn from me today and apply this to our exercise tomorrow of this bedroom plan is you're going to be able to locate the other elements using dimensions and offsetting those objects by those distances. And therefore you're going to have other geometry, and everything is going to be located using an offset command. So most of the time, what you're going to be doing when you're laying out entities for, particularly like I said, a floor plan, is using an offset command. So I want to spend some quality time on that particular command before we start to do this exercise. All right, with that in mind, I'm going to take a quick look at stretch and arrays. All right, so let's take a look at stretch. All right. Here's something that bothers me. I don't know why, but there's a little gap in between the T and the C. I don't know why. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to do a backspace. All right. Stretch. Let's say I have this long element here, and I need to shorten it. Okay. And at this time, I need to shorten it, but I don't really have any particular proportion that I need to, I just wanted to be shorter than it is right now. What I can do is I can stretch the element, meaning I maintain or I keep all the same elements, but they just become shorter. So what we'll do is we'll use the stretch command. Now, the stretch command is an unusual command in the sense of how the elements are selected. The elements for a stretch command are selected by using a crossing window. And that's the only way. So I have this element selected right now. Now I could probably do something with the stretch command, but the main way, the order of operations of doing this is you start the command first, and then you use a crossing window to not select the entire object, you select a portion of the object. All right, so let me deselect this object. All right, go ahead and start the stretch command. All right, the way this works is you don't select the object itself, you select a portion of the object with a crossing window. So I'm going to bring my cursor past the end of this rectangle, pick one point with my left mouse button, and pick another opposite point going from right to left. Everything completely within the crossing window will be moved, and anything that crosses over the boundary will be stretched. Or in this case, I'm actually going to contract. Stretch and contract, I guess, is the opposite of stretch. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick this point here. Now, it asks for more objects. I could select more objects at a time to stretch, but I don't need to select anything else now, so I'm going to hit enter. All right, just like a move command, it wants to know a point of displacement. For this particular portion of this, I'm just going to pick a random point because I do not need to pick a point on the geometry. I don't have to. But just as an example here, I'm just going to pick some random point. And then I'm going to move my mouse, and you can see dynamically what's happening to the object. I am contracting or stretching this so it's smaller, like maybe like this. And I'll just pick a point, and you can see how I've stretched the object, like so. All right, now let's say I want to stretch it, but this time I want to be more exact about it. I don't want this thing to stretch, and I want it to be the same length as this guy here. So I want this end to match up or align with this end. I'm going to select the object in the same exact way, but I will be more precise about the base point and the end point. All right, so I'm going to start the stretch command. Same as I did before, I'm going to start to the right of the object and move my mouse. You don't have to drag, although you could. I have an exercise where I'll do that in just a second here. Pick an opposite corner point, hit the end of the object inside of the window, and the horizontal lines are crossing over the boundary. Those are the objects that are going to stretch. I tell it that I'm done selecting objects, but this time when it asks for a base point, I'm going to pick a point on the object itself, on the corner point. And then I want it to line up with this one. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a snap override. I'm going to hold down my shift key, right click, let go of your shift key, and I want you to select perpendicular. All right. When you do that, I want you to hover over this end of this guy right here, and look above, there's the perpendicular snap. If you click on that vertical edge of that object below, now you can stretch that thing, and it's exactly the same length and perpendicular to the edge of the other one. right. Um, Now this object is so simple. I like to show something with a little bit more complexity. So I'm going to draw a polyline. And if you want to follow with me on this, I'm going to draw a polyline. And let's see. I'm going to draw sort of a shape. All right. This is a little bit more complex. All right, so let's say with this object, you see this middle portion here? Maybe I need this to move a little bit down to here. So I can, basically what I'm trying to show you is the different methods of selection. So I don't have to select the whole thing. What I can do is I can select just a portion of the object or objects. And whatever's within that crossing window is the element that's going to be affected. See that? Now, if I did something like this, I could select the bottom portion also. And I could stretch the bottom portion along with that portion. Okay? Now, let's say I wanted this portion of this shape to stretch up, and I want this portion to stretch up, and I want this portion. And so basically leaving this alone, this portion. Now, one way you could easily, not easily, but one way you could do this is select multiple stretch points. So here's what I'm getting at. I could start the stretch command and create a window, a crossing window around this area, select another crossing area around this area, and select another crossing area around this area. Now, when I go to stretch, look at that, it didn't work. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to show. Look how it did not do what I wanted. What if I wanted to do exactly what I just showed you? Whoops. I'm going to undo that. Here's what I was getting at. As you can see, that didn't work. But what if I did it this way? Stretch. I'm trying to get a crossing window. I'm in a crossing lasso. There we go. Look at this. If I do a crossing lasso, all right, look at that. See how I've got just various portions of the object in my crossing lasso. And now when I stretch it, look at only those portions stretch. You see that? All right, so I just wanted to show you something a little bit more intense than the little rectangle here. That's all. All right, so that's the stretch command. Array. All right, let's take a look at array. Now I have a couple objects here that you can use for array, but I need a little bit more space. So what I like to do is I like to take these two objects here. These are two rectangles. And I like to move them sort of out over here to the left a bit. So I get a lot more room here. All right. Here's the array command. And there's two different array commands that we're going to look at. I don't, path array is something that we can deal with in a level 2 class. But we're going to take a look at rectangular array and polar array. All right, let's start with rectangular array. Go ahead and select rectangular array. All right, it wants to know what objects do you want to array. I'm going to select these two rectangles here. All right, once you've selected those objects, go ahead and hit enter. And look what we get here. We get a contextual tab. Because there's so many little settings that we can do with an array that they might be too confusing in a options. They do have the options down here, but they're basically the same things that you see up here. It's a little bit more easier to follow. It starts us out with an array of 4 columns and 3 rows. You can change that. Let's say I wanted 8 columns. And how about 5 rows? See that? What about the distance in between the columns and the rows? Maybe I want to round this down to something like, instead of 1'7" and whatever that is, how about 2 feet? And how about also 2 feet between the rows? All right. Now, I gave you a little introduction to grips, the little blue elements on objects. And I talked about the grips like on a circle and on a line. But I haven't delved into any other grips. The array object is heavy on grips. You can see them here. Look at the shapes of these ones. These are arrows and arrows. What that means is I can actually adjust how many rows and columns there are by just gripping these grips. Go ahead and click on this triangle here at the end here and move your mouse, and look how you can dynamically add columns and rows. See that? These arrows down here, they determine the space in between. If you grab a hold of those and you move them closer or farther away, you can dynamically change those parameters. And finally, you got this guy. Well, actually, I don't know what this is. The origin of it. So yeah, you just move the whole thing around. It's like one object in a sense. Oh, I didn't think that would happen. And then over here, this guy actually will change rows and columns at the same time. All right. Now, before we exit out of here, I want you to note this guy right here in the contextual tab. Associative. This is turned on. It's got a blue background. If I close this array with this turned on, what's nice about that is that if I need to, I can go back to the array and change it. It's an associative array. Go ahead and click on Close Array. And now, hover over this array. Look how it's a new object for us. This is a array, rectangular. it is also a compound element. I'll show you what I mean about that in a second. So it's not a block, but it is a compound element, just like a block. If I go back and I select it, look, I get now not an array creation contextual tab, but just a plain old array, or I could be more specific about an edit array contextual tab. With that, I can easily access these parameters or the grids, either way. So I can go back in afterwards and change it. All right, and then when I'm done, I just hit close array. Or I can deselect the object. All right, similar to what I was just saying about a compound element, if I need to, for whatever reason, make this now down to its individual elements, and you know, I noticed something, that little other example, I don't know what that was, but that wasn't really a real object. That's why I was surprised by it when I moved the array. Anyway, if I need to break this down to its individual component elements, what do? I explode. So you can explode this object. And now it's no longer an array. It's just individual little polylons. All right. Now, one last thing I'll do with the rectangular array. Go ahead and select something. I exploded that and I erased every one of them except for just one. I'm going to make another array, and I want to show you what happens if you don't have associative turned on. If you don't have associative turned on and you close the array, you no longer have an, well, you never did. You don't have an associative array. It's a one-shot deal. All right? All right, let's look at a polar array. All right, I have this weird little example that I don't really think this is that enlightening, especially for something. Oh, now that I think about it, we're not even going to get to that part. Well, yeah, never mind. I'll use this. I was going to try to use this another example, but just to show this to you, I'm going to. How about this? Here, try this. Add a little circle at the end of this thing. Yeah, something like this. And don't worry about the layer that I have it on. I just want a little bit more of a context to use. All right, let's say I have this sort of object here. And I would like to have copies of it rotate around this circle. More precisely, around the center of this circle. So what you can do is you can select this object and then start the polar array. All right, now what this one needs to know first is what is the center of the array. I want you to select the center of this circle here as the center of your array. All right, once you do that, you're in the array creation tab. Now, don't worry about the fact that when I did this, I forgot that I have the wall layer as the current layer. So it creates my array, my associative, actually it's not associative. Yeah, go ahead and make sure associative is turned back on. Notice how it was turned off when we turned it off in the previous array. So I'm going to make sure it's on here so that we can come back and edit it. So just try to ignore the fact that I had the wall layer as my current layer, and that's why mine looks magenta. But anyway, you can come in here and you can try different numbers of items. Like instead of 6, maybe I put in here 7. Okay? And, or maybe I make it 8, but I only want it to fill half the circle. I want 8, but just on one side of the circle, so I can make this 180 degrees instead of 360. And by the way, anytime you enter something in here, you either click in another field or you can hit enter on your keyboard to sort of register it. All right. Here you even have your grips here, and you can adjust the angle in between, or you could add more angle, more. All right. So that's a little bit about the polar array. Any questions? And I left it as an associative array, so that I can always go back and I can change this. All right. All right. So that's a little introduction to arrays. Now, I want to talk a little bit about offset. I want to give you a little introduction. And then what we're going to do tomorrow is I want to practice with offset. So I'm going to introduce it to you now in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll break for till tomorrow. And then when we start up tomorrow, we're going to practice with the offset command. And what I mean by that is I'm going to actually sort of use as an example in our practice this exercise that we're going to do. So I'm going to have us use some of the dimensions right off of this plan here to practice with before we actually get to the real plan. So what is offset? Here is our exercise for offset. Here's the offset tool. Go ahead and start the offset command. The first thing it wants to know is what distance would you like to offset an object? Let's say I want to offset this line here. I want to offset it 1 foot. 1 foot to the right. Basically what this means is I'm going to pick on this object, and a copy of that object will be created at precisely 1 foot away from it. So I want everybody to type in 12 for 12 units or 12 inches. Hit enter. And then I want you to select this vertical line here. Now, move your mouse to the right of that object and notice a couple things. with your cursor to this side, the thing that is highlighted is your original line. Your original entity is the thing that's highlighted. The line to the side that your cursor is on, that is the resulting, that's a preview. That is going to be the resulting line that's going to be placed. And you can see the distance that you entered in right there, 1 foot. To accept all this, or to offset this element, what I need you to do is click anywhere to the right of this object with your left mouse button. Go ahead and click with your left mouse button. All right, you see how you offset that line and made a copy of it at exactly 12 inches away. That's what I was going to do. Let's change the offset distance. Start the offset command again. And when it asks for a distance, I want you to change this to 6 inches. Just type 6 and hit enter. Select this object again, but this time I want you to move somewhere, your cursor anywhere to the left. All right, and then pick with your left mouse click. Notice the 6 inches that's shown there. Notice how the original object is the one that's highlighted, and the preview is the one that's solid, and that's going to be the result when you click. And there you go. While you're at it, I want you to select the rectangle here, or the polyline. If you go, I'm still in the command. You can select another object, and I want you to pick a point inside the polyline. Look how the preview is showing there's going to be a nice little rectangle inside this rectangle when you click and finish that. See that? Here, try it again. Click inside again. Now, pretty soon you're going to run out of room here with 6 inches. So pretty soon it's not going to let you do it. Yeah, look, it's saying there's that little no sign, the little no symbol. Anyway, that's a little bit of an introduction to offset. Now, all kinds of things can be offset. You can offset, let me see here. I'm probably speaking out of school here. Yeah, you can offset a circle. You already offset a polyline, so I don't need to show you that you can offset a polyline. You can do that. Okay. Remember, these polygons, they're not really polygons, they're polylines, so they can be offset too. You can't offset a block. Look how when I hover over a block, it says no, you can't do. Look at it, it even says it cannot offset that object. Nor an array cannot offset that object. Nor a piece of text. All right, makes sense, but now I want to introduce something to you right off the bat here. Do this for me. Draw a line above here. I don't care how long it is. Just draw a line. Start the offset command, and I want you to put in here 1 inch, just 1 unit. Okay? Select the line you just drew, and I want you to move your mouse above the line. Here's what I want to get across to my students. I'm going to go ahead and offset this. I'm just going to pick a point above the line. And you can see now I have 2 copies offset precisely at 1 inch away. I see my my students doing things like this all the time, and I can't figure out the psychology of it. When they go to offset something, and I'm going to click on this object and to select to offset, they always, not always, but my students, they don't move their mouse that far away from the object. Now, I can't find a way to recreate what happens to my students, but one of the things you might notice is that I'm not very far away from the original object. I do see a preview of a line that's going to appear above it, but also notice that I have a midpoint snap that is showing. Sometimes if your cursor is too close to other geometry, and I don't think it's going to not work this time, but I'm going to go ahead and click. Well, it did work. It worked fine. But sometimes my students and people new to AutoCAD, when they do this, the object does not offset, or it doesn't offset in the correct direction that they want. So I want you to get very used to and very comfortable with when you select the side you want to offset. You do not have to have your cursor so close to the object. All right, so here's an example. Like if I click now, look, it says 0 because I haven't moved to one side or the other, and it's still offset, but I don't know. I wasn't sure which side it might have offset to. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make, and then I'm going to let you guys go, is when you go to offset something, please move your mouse a comfortable distance away from the object being offset. And also, for that matter, try not to be near any other geometry. That might be difficult, but here's the problem. Here's not the problem, but here's the thing. You do not have to be anywhere near anything to offset. You can be so far away and still click, and it'll still offset the same. Okay? Like, if, for instance, if I select this bottom line, I don't have to be this close by. Now, I'm exaggerating this, and of course it would be less efficient to do something like this. You don't need to do this. But it'll still work is what I'm getting. I don't know how or why, but sometimes my students, they think that, I think it's something they think they have to click on the object. I don't know why they think that, but they have to click on the object in order to create the copy or the offset. No, you're just deciding what side you want to offset. You just pick a point anywhere to that side. It doesn't have to be close by the object. Just pick anywhere above, in this case, or below, up and down, and all, and so forth. All right, we're going to continue this tomorrow, and we're going to practice with a real-world scenario. I shouldn't say real world, but in our exercise scenario, and then we're going to actually start our project. So we have that to look forward to tomorrow, the offset command that we're going to practice with, and we're going to use it quite extensively in our exercise. All right, before we break, is there any questions? All right then, do this for me. You can close your AutoCAD. You don't have to save any as well. Yeah, you don't have to save any of the drawings. I noticed, and I'll do it myself, if you leave AutoCAD on in the virtual machine, the virtual machine shuts down and it crashes AutoCAD. And when you open it up in the morning, you'll have that recovery manager. And I just don't want to add more confusion to the matter. So just close your drawings. You can either save them or not. It doesn't matter. And then close AutoCAD. And then you can log off after that. So when you arrive in the morning, you won't have that recovery manager thing appear. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow morning. All right, take care.